coronavirus outbreak that is seeing numbers of those infected and killed rising every day impact the Indian economy. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman met with industry leaders today to take stock and said measures are being taken to ensure there is minimal impact on supply chains to Indian businesses. But this may be easier said than done. India imports $70 billion worth of goods from China. Our pharmaceutical industry imports 80 to 85% of APIs, that is the active ingredients needed to make medicines, from China. Over 80% components for mobile phones come from China. We're dependent on Chinese components to generate solar power. So far, supply chains have been relatively smooth. But are we looking at a massive disruption? Before we begin the conversation, let's play out for you some of the concerns Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman heard from industry today.
Manufacturing sector, who depends on raw material to come from China, are worried that some of them have been receiving their stocks, but because the necessary paperwork is not coming from China, their stocks are being held here in the ports. The request was, can customs take a self-declaration or some kind of a statement from them and release the stocks? There was also this question of many others saying, can we look at other sources of sourcing of raw materials, on which the industry, together with the CIA and FICCI and so on, will be talking with the concerned ministries. Manufacturing industries, particularly some MSMEs, also said, look, if the cycle of receiving the goods, manufacturing and sending it out is getting affected because of delayed or staggered raw material supply, banks will also have to understand that our payment receipts will be taking their own time. So to that extent, they wanted flexibility from the banks also.
So it's good news that a conversation has begun on what could be the impact of coronavirus. By the way, the latest figures show 1,800 killed. Definitely the numbers are rising. In terms of the virus actually reaching India, relatively it has been contained. But can the virus infect the Indian economy? Are fears of a coronavirus disruption of the Indian economy real or overestimated? Speaking to us now on this are Pankaj Mohindru, National President of the Indian Cellular Association, Jayant Das Gupta, former ambassador and former permanent representative of India to the WTO, and Amirullah Khan, Indian economist. Welcome to all of you and thank you for speaking with us today on the show. Mr. Das Gupta, let me begin by just getting your perspective because the coronavirus scare is a scare. And how real are the fears of the disruption we could see on the Indian economy, considering our huge dependence on certain sectors, at least on Chinese imports?
I think we can separate the issues into two parts. One is about import dependence for consumption within India, and the second part is about import dependence for adding value and exporting from out of India. As far as the first part is concerned, let us take up the case of pharmaceuticals. As you mentioned, about between 70 and 80% of the APIs used by Indian pharmaceutical companies come from China. Now, there is already a price hike in paracetamol and ibuprofen, for instance, and perhaps on azithromycin. Now, some of these medicines are in common usage, and huge volumes are required to cater to the requirements of Indian citizens. Now, also, many of these APIs are used for preparing formulations for exports. So it affects both imports for domestic consumption as well as exports. Take the case of auto components. Hubei, for instance, and Wuhan in particular, is the center for auto components manufacturing in China. So that is going to get affected if this continues for very long. Let us then take the case of computers and mobile phone components.
Yeah.
Mobile phone components, we are hugely dependent on Chinese imports. So all these industries are going to get affected. The domestic consumption part, which means that manufacturing in India and perhaps job losses, that will come about. And the second part is exports will also get hit.
Wow, that's quite a long list. That's quite a long list, and that answers my first question. Is this a real scare? Well, it sounds like it very much is. Let me ask Mr. Pankaj Mohindru, and just one segment of smartphones. If I just look at smartphones, and of course you can speak about the larger issue as well later, but if you can just give us a perspective of the kind of dependence we have on, and not just us, actually the whole world as far as smartphones and technology is concerned, on China, and what it could really mean in terms of impact here.
No, I think what Jayant said, we were actually a bit terrified when this came out. And the saving grace was that we had Spring Festival stock up. You see, when the Chinese New Year comes, which was getting over on 31st January, there is a 2 to 4 weeks stock pile up of components, because the experience is that after the Spring Festival, the Chinese New Year's, the workers come back sometimes a week later or 2 weeks later. So that is seeing us through at the moment. The peculiar factor about smartphones and mobile phones is that we are a just-in-time industry in terms of finished stock and also the raw material. The good news is that what we were fearing last week, the fears have abated to some extent. Many plants have opened, supplies have resumed, and in many regions now the cases are, maybe just 1 or 2 like that. So I think the Chinese government has done a fantastic job of containing this it could have been a catastrophe.
Yeah.
They've been able to contain it to some extent. But I mean, all is not over. We have to keep watching it very, very, very carefully. And there is not much we can do except the proactiveness which the finance minister has shown. You see, some banks will have to take some view on letters of credits, etc.
Yeah.
But it's too early to say that. I think by the end of this week and the middle of next week, things will improve a lot.
Well,
That's my gut feel now.
Okay, well, let's hope so, and it's good to know that at least you're seeing some improvement and some supply chains opening. Mr. Khan, what is your take? Do you think that there is a bit of a scare more than anything else? And also, doesn't it underline our huge dependence on the Chinese economy? A larger lesson to take away from here?
Yeah, both good points, Tamanna. What I would like to say right at the beginning is that this is far more serious than we are making it out to be, for precisely the reason that when such a big epidemic happens in the neighborhood, then it necessarily percolates in the entire region. You see some people who are celebrating, saying that look, China is in trouble, so some of that business will move to India, cannot be more misplaced in this confidence, because what happens is that any calamity that affects a particular area, the entire region gets affected. People stop traveling, people stop buying, economic activity comes down, and that is what is going to happen, and that is why we need to be worried. Not just worried because business is going down, but worried because people are dying, and they are dying in our neighborhood, and that virus can very easily travel. So the point really is not so much about the economy as it is about ensuring that we are ready and prepared to handle any such exigency that might happen, either through our ports or our airports. That's the first point. The second point is that this scare is indeed a big scare, because this time we are not sure as to what is going on. Is the virus still transmitting from animal to human being? Is the virus now in the air? Is the virus transmitting human to human? And this scare that we are seeing on the high seas, this one hapless couple who's there in Wuhan, the Indian couple who's unable to come out.
Yeah.
These are very poignant issues that we need to grapple with. So it's mostly it's mostly something that is a matter of worry for our Ministry of Health and our Ministry of External Affairs.
No, no,
The
absolutely.
Finance
No,
Minister
Mr.
will
Khan,
worry about it a few
absolutely. I'm not
months
taking
later.
away. No, no, absolutely. I'm not taking away from, the human and medical aspect of it. And regular viewers of this program will know that from day one, we've been talking about the coronavirus, how India is ready for it, where are the cures. We've
Yes.
spoken to the WHO. I'm focusing on a very specific aspect right now. With the hope, of course, that it doesn't spread, etc., etc. I'm focusing on the impact on Indian businesses for the simple reason that we are hugely interconnected. Apart from all the Swadeshi talk, the fact is that we're hugely dependent on
Absolutely,
China.
absolutely. Very true, Tamanna. And to answer that question, you see, this couldn't have come at a worse time for us because our exports have been struggling. And we have been, doing poorly on exports for nearly 2 years now. And this is going to dampen them further because, China is one of our larger buyers also. And therefore, it is going to have an impact. Our pharma sector, which was beginning to get back, is going to struggle because the input costs have gone up. The electronic sector, which is a major driver of the Indian economy, is going to have a problem. So therefore, on the export front, we are fragile. And more importantly on imports, because if we are not going to get imports from China and if we want to redo this supply chain as the finance minister has hinted we will, or as the industry says it will, then where is it going to buy stuff from? Because, ramping up production is not easy. It cannot happen so quickly. And therefore, if we are looking at Malaysia or Vietnam, it is going to take time.
Let me look at that question. Now, of course, best case scenario is, like Mr. Mohendru is saying, best case scenario is that China works quickly to contain this, and they've shown they've built a hospital in days. So that's best case scenario for us and for the world. Where are the alternatives? Have you started looking at that? Do we need to? Mr. Dasgupta, you want to comment on that point? First of all, alternative supply chains, and then also this, this sort of dream that sometimes sounds far-fetched, but something the chief economic advisor said that, is there an opportunity for India to move manufacturing here?
I would take up this issue into in several parts. But before I do that, I'd just like to mention that there is a study which has been done on the basis of a mathematical model by the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. It predicts that the coronavirus will peak around the 3rd or 4th week of February, and after that it will die down, but quite slowly at that. And then with the advent of spring and the temperatures going up, it is not likely to continue for very long in its present form. Of course, there would be some cases, stray cases here and there. So that is the good news. As far as developing alternative sources of supply are concerned, for most of the industries, like auto components, for instance, or electronics, mobile phones, the investments required are very high. So it is not likely that we would be able to get alternative suppliers in the short or even in the medium term. And India would be able to attract investments and, set up a base on its own. But having said that, the announcement made by the government some time ago about helping the mobile phone industry by providing capital subsidies, for instance, and other benefits to large companies which will export from out of India and also sell in the domestic market. That is a step in the right direction because it will nudge these industries to bring in their partners and develop a whole ecosystem. The last point I wanted to make is that there are certain industries which are very important from the national security perspective. Pharmaceuticals, for instance. And there, we had 6 PSUs which were manufacturing, for instance, antibiotics and other essential medicines. Now, most of them have either shut down or are on the verge of closing down. So we need to step back and take a look at this, whole scenario. Whether we need to build up our own capabilities, maybe not to the extent of 100%, but enough to see us through a crisis of this kind. in future.
You're not suggesting
in
PSU
terms
start
of medicines.
making medicines again? Because I'm not sure if that's the answer.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that, you can't also throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Okay.
So PSUs have certain, advantages. And of course, public-private partnership could also take place.
Self-dependency, self-sufficiency. Let me get some responses to that. Mr. Khan, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, on the pharma front, I think that we need to develop alternate supplies, because we can't be so vulnerable that an incident that happens anywhere in China or Africa disrupts our supply chain. I don't think there is any which way in which we can do that, and that is the red signal, that if we are caught unprepared, if we are suddenly declaring or getting into a panic situation with regards to drugs like ibuprofen and crocin, then we are in trouble, because then it means that we are going to get affected by something that's happening in China, and we will not be ready for anything that might happen in India. So on that front, we better be ready. But on the more business side of it, I think it is very important for all business in India to realize that this is not going to get sorted out very quickly. It is not going to be a quick call to another company saying, please deliver X, Y, and Z. They have to now decide how they are going to reschedule their supplies and service their orders. That hit every firm must be ready to take very quickly and get ready to do that. It is it's an international calamity. Of course, there will be costs that everyone will bear, and the little cost that our industry has to bear, it has to. It cannot rush to the government. There is nothing that the government can do on this ground, except give them some empty assurances. But it's the industry that has to ensure that its supply chain is rejigged to build into its calculation the fact that disruptions might continue for the next 3 or 4 weeks, and that's if things turn out well. It could very well take a little longer.
I think it's also an opportunity to look at the world and India's dependence on China, and in the sense that hopefully the coronavirus and its impact will die down, but you don't know when the next one is coming along. It's a very different kind of a world, and Mr. Mohindru, I want you to come in on this part, especially in smartphones. There has been an attempt by the Indian government for a long time to push manufacturing here. It succeeded to some extent, but not quite yet. What do you think we need to do in this space so that we create more self-sufficiency?
No, I think morally, first of all, in this environment and these circumstances, we should support our neighbor and see whatever support we can give to China to sort out this issue. What you are saying are very long-term competitiveness issues. And our mobile phone manufacturing has grown about 900% in the last 4 years. It's a blazing success in Make in India. And the phased manufacturing program and the development of the component industry is also very robust. And now we are moving from a very robust 2 lakh crore manufacturing, domestic manufacturing, 7 times to 14 lakh crores. So I think as far as mobile phones are concerned, we are razor sharp in what we have to do in the long term and the medium term. This disruption is something, we should not feel happy about morally. And the global supply chain will remain in China for a number of years.
Yeah.
Gradually, we are trying to build competitiveness in India. So these are, as Jan said, these are very long-term things where the whole might of government of India has to come behind building an industry.
Yeah.
And I think we are seeing green shoots, and we are very confident that this is going to happen.
No, absolutely.
But as far as the coronavirus, the China situation is concerned,
yeah,
I am not that pessimistic now.
No, absolutely. And I take on board, I think that's a really good input over there from Mr. Mohindra coming in that, on humanitarian grounds, you have to support your neighbor at this time. It can happen in any part of the world. We really don't know what exactly has happened, and we've seen these scares before. I just want to talk about the preparedness of the Indian economy for this possibly disrupting supply chains. And let me come to Mr. Khan on this for just a minute. Now, we've had one round of meetings. The finance minister says that secretaries will follow up, etc., etc. But if supply chains over time are disrupted, really what options do we have, and what can the Indian government and industry do?
Very bluntly, there is very little that the government can do. In fact, there is nothing that the government can do. As far as industry is concerned, this is something that has come, it's a black swan event, it's a bolt from the blue. There was nothing they could have done to have predicted such a thing. Having said that, do they have alternatives? Have they kept some ways out for such calamities? Unfortunately, I don't think that has happened. And therefore, you will find the industry running helter-skelter right now, trying to figure out what it is that they can or will do. Can Vietnam, can Malaysia fill in this gap? It cannot. I mean, there is nothing that can ramp up so quickly in sectors that have huge amounts of gestation period, large capital costs. So therefore, the Indian industry must realize that here is a difficult situation which has come at a tough time, while it is still struggling to come out, while there is a consumption, bust. There is a problem. The solar industry particularly will have to worry, and the only thing they can do now is what happens when there are such acts of God, that they have to take a deep breath, build in these losses into their balance sheets, and wait out this calamity. Anything other than that is not going to work in the short run. In the long term, what you said, Tamanna, is absolutely right. That can we now think of building alternate supply chains, think of working a way around this huge dependence on China for the primary reason that the trade deficit with China is unprecedented. We have a huge trade deficit. We've never had this earlier.
Yeah.
And therefore, we need to do something to cut down that deficit. It is putting a great pressure on the rupee. So we have to do that in any case. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with the coronavirus. And the last point I want to make here is that, one thing we must stop talking about, and I say this as an economics professor, is self-sufficiency. In this modern day and age, there is nothing like self-sufficiency. We all have to exist together because supply chains are best accessed from where they are the most efficient, and right now the most efficient economy is China. We are not going to replace China. We are going to be another country, another market. Like China never replaced anybody. China grew up as a big market on its own, and we have to do the same. If we try to replace China, we will never be able to win this game.
Thank you so much to all of you for joining us on the debate this evening.